What would change in the world if you, me, and everyone choose to feed the wolf of possibilities instead of the one of doubt, distrust, and despair? The way I see it, our point of view creates reality, not the other way around. Somewhere deep within, I think we know that. In this podcast, I am daring you to claim this remarkable superpower. Join us and be inspired by trackers, explorers, and finders of possibilities from the multiverse of hope. Welcome to the podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities, with your host, Katarina Valentin. Welcome to this episode of the Wolf Podcast. Today, we're going to dive into the possibilities of everything green, alive, and growing. Meet the brilliant Monica Gilliam, a plant whisperer with green, sparkly fingers. Come along and find out more about her secret agenda for the entire world. Welcome, Monica.
Hi.
So what is it with you and plants? Tell us.
Well, honestly, I never thought that it was anything all of that special. I thought that everybody loved plants the way that I do. And it's taken me quite a while to realize that maybe there's something a little bit different for me with plants, but they just really capture my attention. And so in that, it's like I'm always present with them. I find them to nurture my body in a certain way. It's like when I'm in a place that has plants, I relax. And when I'm in a place that doesn't have plants, I'm just a little bit more tense. And so it's this kind of subtle thing when I look at it for me, but I've just always had a way with helping plants grow. And I know it's really funny. And maybe this says something more about how we are in general, but it really is this thing that has been so easy for me that I did just assume that it was easy for everybody else,
Well, it is interesting. Like my mom had what people would call green fingers in Sweden, where she really loved plants. She would spend hours in the garden and she would spend a lot of times, taking care of the plants in the house as well. And there were plants everywhere all the time. And they were always thriving. And I would say for me, when I watched her as a kid, it was her caring for the plants, and she would talk to them. She would have little conversations with them when
Totally.
She walked by and tell them about the little leaves that were falling off or something else that was going on. And then she would water them. She would be very careful what plant needed what. So if you looked at that, would you say that you have green fingers?
Yeah, with you saying that, it's like, think about anything where there's so much care extended, maybe it's to an animal, maybe it's to a friendship or something like that. And it's like your presence is the nurturing, your caring is what creates those green fingers. I actually, the funny thing, I used to work with this woman from Sweden. It was very, very Swedish from my understanding, not being Swedish or not having grown up there. And she was always talking to her plants and showing me all of these different things about her plants. And she talked a lot about, the consciousness of the earth, and that there's like this aliveness to the plants that was different than maybe other people would think about. And then she introduced me to a lot of different books and the work of the people in Scotland at this garden Findhorn, where they were doing all sorts of really simple things of just like talking to the garden, asking the garden for assistance. They moved to this plot of land that was not very rich. The soil was not very rich or anything. And they just started talking to what they said was like the spirit of the earth and just asking, okay, so what's possible? What can we have here? And we need, richer dirt. And then a truck of cow manure took the turn really quickly and dropped a bunch of cow manure. And all of these things just started to come together. I was reading these books that were just so magical in the way that people would just go out into the garden and talk to the garden and ask what the garden was showing them, and just kind of relax and let themselves include themselves in this unfolding conversation that was going on all around them, with the growing process. And so this woman who I worked for, she one day she asked me to go into the garden and cut back all of these plants. And I was like, early 20s, I was like, oh no, how would that feel for the plants? I think the plants are alive. Is it going to be okay? Is it going to hurt them? So I went out into the garden and I just said, okay, garden, I have this job to do. And if there's anything that I shouldn't cut, can you just let me know? And if there's anything that I should cut, can you let me know? And I wasn't even really certain who I was talking to. I was just like, if there's anything that can hear me and talk to me, let me know. And so then I just started cutting away, and every once in a while, my hands would just stop. And it wasn't like I couldn't move them. They would just pause. And then I knew I had asked. So then maybe I should listen. And I would kind of investigate. And it was like, there was a moment that I was about to cut through the watering system. And there was a moment that I was about to cut through another little plant that was hidden. And in that moment, for me, it was like, wow, I'm aware of something that I didn't even realize I could be engaging with. And I've always just had this appreciation for the garden. But then there it was like, I was so empowered in a way to engage by including the garden, by asking, okay, what would you like? And then, from then on, I'm so curious. I just started asking all sorts of questions like, hey, tree, what's it like to be a tree? And then my attention would just go wherever it would go. It would go to the bark, or it'd go to the roots or something. And then I would just kind of ask to energetically be present there. And all sorts of things have opened up. So it's been like my own journey of discovery with myself, of just getting to ask questions and have the joy of exploration in the world. And then with the plants in particular, there's been this kind of feedback that I've started to notice.
In a way, you're creating this relationship with the plants in a very different relationship, more like a creationship or a sense of oneness. And these studies where if you scream at a plant, it actually dies. And if you talk kindly and friendly to a plant, it grows more. And it's like taking that and expanding that possibility into something so much more.
Truly. I mean, I studied acupuncture and other energetic healing modalities, and there were all of these really, really subtle techniques that we would do with people's bodies, and the impact that it would have was remarkable. So like, there's one thing with Japanese acupuncture where you test the pulse. And so as we were learning, we would have one practitioner who was like trying to figure out where to needle. And then, their friend was feeling the pulse of the person. And whenever you got to a place where the body was like, yes, that seems great, then the pulse would really relax, or the pulse would change. But the thing is that it would change, the pulse for everybody in the room would change when that one person's body got like more ease or was listened to. It was like, yeah, right over here. And so my teacher would stand across the room, and she would just feel her own pulse. And then she could verify for each of us if we were, on a point that would like really be a contribution or not. And it was so amazing to notice that. And it's just like, we spend a lot of time trying to like verify what we're aware of. And we have the scientists who have the cool little gadgets and, machines and stuff like that. But there's so much more, obviously, than what we've been able to measure, that for kind of the general people walking through the world, there's actually this like magic going on that people don't recognize because maybe they haven't been introduced to it, And so this thing about like the pulse that just, inspired me so much is that is an energetic resonance that moves out into the world. And it can affect everything. It can affect the people, but it can also affect the plants, the animals, everything.
So the screaming is another resonance, and the kindness is another resonance. True. And I know that lately, probably the past, quite a few years now, some doctors have been prescribing garden therapy to people. So you got
I didn't know that. I would prescribe.
If you had seen Monica, you would have seen her very happy. So would you want to talk about that?
Oh my goodness. Well, okay. This is where I might get a little bit out there, but so homeopathy, it's the thing that I find that's really interesting about it is that the different plants and, different medicines that are, or kind of ingredients that become a part of homeopathic medicines, they are so subtle. And it's not a huge chemical component. It's like diluted and diluted and diluted and diluted. And so it's more like the energetic essence of whatever that is, that your body receives this signature of something, and then your body responds with that or to that in all sorts of different ways. I'm not, completely educated in homeopathy. I just find it super interesting because my experience in the garden has been something like that, where I don't always need to eat the thing to receive from it. I can just go into the garden and be next to a certain plant, and my body will kind of receive its pulse or its energetic resonance. And it's been interesting because I did study quite a lot of herbology, herbal medicine, and there have been times when my body has been having some sort of difficulty or other, even something as silly as just like itchiness or kind of like insect stings or something. And I've just gone out into the garden and it said, okay, body, what do you require? And then I, kind of wander around or I go on a walk or something, and I find myself really drawn to a particular plant. And so then I just go hang out with it and admire it and enjoy it, and kind of, I have a little app on my phone that takes a picture of it and tells me what it is because I don't always remember their names, and then I just, enjoy that. And I can't tell you how many times when I've gone to study more about that particular plant, that has been the medicine for whatever it is that was going on with my body. And I would notice this kind of release, and it sometimes it's been quite noteworthy, like a trumpet playing, and sometimes it's very subtle. But so to think about people being invited to go into the garden, it's like, yes, I mean, there is every medicine possible here, and honestly, our bodies would not survive without the plants. We wouldn't be able to breathe, we wouldn't be able to eat, or, maybe the animals that we eat wouldn't be able to eat, so it's like our well-being is really a part of this conversation with everything that's going on the planet, with all of the life and living that's here, so being invited to go into the garden is, I can't think of anything more exciting, because to have more people kind of include themselves in the environment, in what's actually going on beyond their walls, there's just so much nurturing that can go in all directions, both from the people into the world and from the world into the people, you know?
What's your sense about this, like a growing movement of earthing, step barefoot out on the earth and receive the energy of the earth? What's your sense around that?
It's funny. I bought a little sheet that's like an earthing sheet a while ago because I was living in an apartment building and in a place that was cold. And so I never was just walking out on the earth. And I actually did notice that I slept really well with it. I think that it's amazing the resonance that gets created for the body when stepping onto the earth versus being around a bunch of like computers and whatnot. And that's the kind of thing that for me, it's like being reminded to say hello to the earth, however you do it, is like, yes, let's have more of that. If you want a gadget to do it, if you need to give it a name, to remind yourself to go step on the earth, like, yes, it's also actually possible, no matter where you are, to kind of reach out and connect with the earth. And it's remarkable being in rooms of people when they are reminded to do that, how immediately it changes, because no matter where you are, unless you're, very few people who are going into space, you are on the earth, and everything that is surrounding you has at some point come from some process of something that was found here on the earth, and so there's earth all around you to be connecting with. And a lot of the time it's our point of view that we use to separate ourselves. You can be inside a house that's, right next to a bunch of trees, and maybe you don't have any plants inside. And you can think, I'm not around plants, but that's not really true. You just have a little wall up, literally, and sometimes figuratively as well. And you can simply ask to be aware of the plants nearby. And what I love with that so much is, I invite people to talk to the plants all the time. And I'm so grateful that it doesn't seem as crazy as I thought it would when I was younger, to invite people to talk to the plants. But it really is just about getting their own attention engaged beyond, their fingertips or beyond the end of their nose. If you ask somebody to talk to a plant, then they just become a bit more aware of it, and if the plant has anything to say in return, awesome, But so with the whole like earthing movement and all of that, it's like, yes, it's time for us to remember that we are a part of this amazing unfolding conversation of life and living on this planet. We're not separate from it, no matter how much we've tried to make ourselves separate from it. And that, there are all of these ways that we can engage beyond that separation, whether that's going out and putting your feet on the ground and having a sense of what that is. Or, some people can't put their feet on the ground and say they're in a wheelchair or something like that, but none of it has to limit you, to not receive from this, nurturing planet that we're on.
Thank you. It's so true. I moved to a new house about 3 years ago, and the forest is right here. It's like right outside the window there. And in the mornings, I'll see hares and deers walking across my garden. And it's changed the whole way I relate to coming home. When I come home, I'm actually home with the earth. I'm home with the forest. I'm not just home in my house, but I'm actually home back with the forest again.
Right. Well, it's funny that you say that because, so I have my secret agenda. I have several secret agendas, and one is for the entire earth to become a park. And it's like, what is that? What is a park? A park is a place that is full of habitat, and that can include people, and it doesn't have to exclude anybody else, so I've had these little campaigns that I'm starting, and maybe it's just me telling my parents or whatever, but it's working. Oh, so one of them is like a park in every home, like if you have a little spot that a little cricket can live in, it's a park. And then also like get to know your neighbors. Who are your neighbors? Your neighbors are not just the people. Your neighbors are that tree over there that is home to so many species. We watch these like nature documentaries and stuff like that, and are just like, oh my gosh, did you see this bird? It was so beautiful. But that bird is actually coming to your house regularly or whatever, so it's like you talking about the deer and the hares and stuff like that. It's like, these are your neighbors, and how fun. I mean, it's funny. I think about this with people who have dogs and cats and stuff. I'm always, ever since I was a kid, I was like, you have a friend who's a dog? That's amazing. How cool is that? And like, we can have that more and more, like, oh yeah, that's the squirrel that comes through my house or through my yard, maybe not your house, but so like going around and getting to know your neighbors and realizing that you can like introduce yourself or introduce them to you. It's very exciting. So hearing you, being at home with the forest, it's like, yes. And what an amazing neighbor to have. What an amazing bunch of beings of all sorts to be able to go and say hello to.
Wow, I love that you have that secret agenda. That is probably the best secret agenda I've ever heard so far. Thank you for sharing that. Before we end, if people want to hear more about your secret agendas and your love for plants, I know you started a Facebook group. Is that open for everyone?
Yeah, totally. It's Talk to the Plants.
And how do they find it?
Well, you go to Facebook and you search Talk to the Plants. It's a group. I started a page, but I don't look at that page very often, but I look at the group.
So if you would like to join this agenda of making the whole world into a park and start talking to plants, come on and join Monica somewhere, whatever social channel of your choice. Thank you so much, Monica. It's been an amazingly fun and happy podcast.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities. I hope you have more space in your world now. If you would like to listen to earlier episodes, share with other people, or subscribe, please go to Spotify, iTunes, or visit katrinavalentin.com/wolf.